They arrested me for parking a car in my own driveway, not blocking traffic, not trespassing, just parked, middle of the afternoon, sun shining, birds chirping, and I'm standing next to my brand new Rolls-Royce Phantom, silver like moonlight, and cleaner than a preacher's browser history, when two squad cars roll up like I'm cooking meth on the hood. And what was my crime? Owning the kind of car folks usually only see in rap videos or dreams. The HOA president, Janice Whitaker, whose voice sounds like a blender full of gravel and judgment, stood in the middle of my lawn, pointing at me like I'd keyed her minivan, yelling, "That thing is a public disturbance," metal on skin, humiliation in front of gawking neighbors, and me thinking, Lord, I didn't work my whole life to get tackled by Karen in the Cuffs Club because my dreams came true in the wrong zip code. I knew one thing. Janice Whitaker had just declared war, and I'm not built to back down. Not when I've spent my whole life fighting to be here. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you love wild, true-feeling stories packed with twists, justice, and just the right amount of HOA chaos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is even more jaw-dropping, and trust me, the surprises coming next, you won't want to miss them. 48 hours earlier, I was just a new homeowner unloading boxes and sipping coffee out of a chipped Best Realtor Ever mug. I'd finally made it. After growing up bouncing through foster homes, teaching myself real estate from free library books, and flipping every disaster of a property I could find, I landed in Copperwood Estates. The kind of place where the lawns are symmetrical, the houses have names like Juniper Falls carved in stone, and everyone waves like they're being watched. I had parked my dream car, my reward, my symbol of survival, right in my own damn driveway. That was the spark. Janice emerged like a storm cloud with pearl earrings. She marched up, red-faced and snarling, slapped a notice on my windshield so hard I thought she cracked the glass. "This is a violation," she barked. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Ma'am, I live here. That's my car. This is my driveway." Her eyes narrowed like I'd insulted her grandkids and tax bracket in the same breath. It wasn't a warning. It was a declaration of war. By sundown, a community-wide email had gone out. "New resident has been found in violation of neighborhood standards," it read. "Aggressive display of wealth, disturbing aesthetic harmony, and my favorite, vehicle of questionable taste." I didn't even know taste could be policed, until Janice tried to write it into a bylaw. I pulled out the actual HOA rulebook. Nothing in it about personal driveways, luxury cars, or the number of neighbors emotionally wounded by your parking choices. She made it all up on the spot, with the confidence of someone who once got a standing ovation for organizing a bake sale. I tried to call her directly, thinking we could talk like adults. Mistake. "You listen to me, hotshot," she snapped over the phone. "You might have money, but I've got history. I've run this neighborhood for over a decade. I've seen your kind before. Flashy, loud. Think you can change every—" Now look, I didn't buy that car just to flex. I bought it because when I was 10 years old, living with a family who used the oven for heat, I saw one glide past the window like a spaceship from another world. I promised myself then, one day, I'd earn it. And I did. Every inch of chrome, every stitch in that leather interior is soaked in sacrifice. So no, I wasn't about to let some gatekeeping lawn monarch strip that from me because she thinks success should be invisible. But I wasn't reckless. I started walking the neighborhood, striking up casual conversations. That's when the stories started spilling. Tyrese down the block got fined $500, 0 cents for planting off-shade marigolds. The Wynn family left last year after their kid's sidewalk chalk was labeled graffiti. Janice didn't run an HOA. She ran a fiefdom with bylaws that moved like goalposts in the wind. Then came the threat that tipped the scales. An official-looking letter taped to my door. "Vehicle must be removed by tonight or face immediate tow at owner's expense." I stormed outside, ready to say something loud enough for HOA history books, only to find Janice standing by my mailbox with that smug smirk that should be illegal in 48 states. "Go ahead and fight me," she said, stepping so close I could smell her lilac perfume and power trip. "You won't just lose that car. You lose everything. Ask the Connors, ask the Grants, ask the people who thought they could win. She turned and walked off like a villain in a bad daytime soap. But before she left, she glanced at the crowd gathering on their porches and added, "Some people just don't belong in neighborhoods like this." I looked around, heart pounding, mind spinning. Was this about my car or something deeper? I knew one thing. Janice Whitaker had just declared war. And I'm not built to back down. Not when I've spent my whole life fighting to be here. The morning after the arrest, I sat on my front steps, holding a mug of black coffee like it was the last shield I had left. I was still in shock that a neighborhood dispute over a driveway had escalated into an actual pair of handcuffs and a viral HOA drama. But what really got me? Janice wasn't done. Nope. An email arrived while I was still trying to finish my coffee. "Repeat offender alert," the subject line read, followed by a bullet list of infraction that could only have been written by someone with too much authority and too few hobbies. Excessive curbside glare, vehicle size incompatible with community theme, and, my favorite, impression of socio-economic imbalance. That last one sounded like it was cribbed from a bad college thesis. I scrolled through the HOA handbook, expecting to find at least something to back her up, but page after page, nothing. Not a single rule matched her claims. The woman had invented an entire legal fiction, like she was J.K. Rowling for suburban tyranny. And that's when I realized Janice wasn't enforcing rules. She was writing her own fan fiction. Now let me be clear, that car wasn't a flex. It was a promise fulfilled. I'd dreamed of that Rolls-Royce since I was 10 years old, watching one pass by a cracked window in foster care. For most people, a car is transportation. For me, it was proof that you could build something from nothing, even when the odds said otherwise. But Janice didn't see that. She saw it as an attack on her fragile empire of mulch ordinances and mailbox standards. She wielded the HOA handbook like a sword, except she never bothered to read it. She just made up rules like a game of suburban Mad Libs, and while I laughed at the ridiculousness of it, something about her confidence chilled me. See, real power gets checked, but petty power? It just multiplies behind curtains. The fact that she could make it up and folks still nodded, that meant she wasn't just petty, she was practiced. And that's when the whispers started. I'd step outside and see blinds tilt just slightly. Mailboxes became gossip kiosks. The folks who smiled on day one were now suddenly unavailable for eye contact. A few brave ones nodded or said, "Hang in there," like I was the new guy on death row. One neighbor, a school teacher named Marcus Taylor, quietly told me he once got a violation for non-conforming porch plants. His wife had planted lavender. Janice preferred boxwood. I asked if he challenged it. He just laughed and said, "We like living here, man." That sentence stayed with me. People weren't following the rules because they agreed. They were complying out of fear. Janice didn't need to be right. She just needed people too tired or too scared to fight. And isn't that how all petty tyrants win? I went deeper, downloaded every page of the HOA's policy archive, compared dates, edits, signatures. I even printed out past board minutes that Janice had conveniently summarized herself. The deeper I went, the more the absurdities piled up. The real bylaws were basic. No commercial vehicles, no unregistered junkers, keep lawns clean. That's it. Nothing about car brands, paint colors, or economic intimidation by parking preference. Janice had created an invisible rulebook that only she could see and punish from. It reminded me of playground games where one kid changes the rules every time they're losing, but instead of jump rope, this game came with $500 0-cent fines and public shaming. I didn't know if I wanted to laugh or scream, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down now. I was just getting warmed up. Then came the note, taped to my door in red ink with the kind of passive-aggressive flair only a career HOA president could pull off. Final warning, remove vehicle by midnight or it will be towed at owner's expense, no exceptions. The bold letters screamed, even if Janice hadn't. My stomach turned. there it was, the escalation. First came the fake rule. Then came the fake outrage, and now the threat of a real consequence, built on nothing but Janice's imagination and a flimsy claim to power. But threats don't scare me. Not when they're built on lies. Still, I knew one thing. I couldn't just fight this woman with logic. I'd have to beat her at her own game. And to do that, I needed help. Because this wasn't just about my car anymore. It was about the kind of neighborhood people get stuck in. Or the kind they stand up and change. Midnight was coming fast, and so was the next move. But Janice Whittaker had no idea that the rookie she tried to shame out of Copperwood was about to flip her entire rulebook on its head. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I never expected to look out my window and see a crowd of grown adults holding paint cans like they were going into battle. And leading the charge? Greg Mallory, Janice Whittaker's most loyal board member and human bobblehead. The man nods so much in her direction, I'm surprised he doesn't have whiplash. Greg had his megaphone out, barking phrases like community standards and visual pollution, like he was rallying troops for war instead of stirring up a backyard HOA mutiny. Behind him, about 15 folks stood awkwardly, some holding signs, some clearly just there for the drama. And right in the middle of it all, my poor car. My dream. Just sitting in the driveway like a well-dressed guest at the wrong kind of party. I should have moved it, but I didn't. I was tired of running, and apparently that made me a target. I heard the first egg before I saw it, splat against the hood like a slap in slow motion. Then came the second, then the paint. Green, neon, maybe left over from some kid's science project. Someone actually yelled, "That'll teach him," as if vandalizing my property was a civic duty. I stood frozen, blinds half drawn, watching my Rolls-Royce get treated like it was a streetwalker in church clothes. All that effort, all that symbolism reduced to a canvas for cowardice. And here's the wild part. Some of the people out there, I'd seen them watering their azaleas last week, waving, smiling. Now they were part of the mob, hiding behind the excuse of just following HOA protocol, as if that absolved them of acting like a pack of middle-aged bullies with arts and craft supplies. I didn't move. I just watched. Because I needed to remember all of it for what was coming next. Now let me tell you about Elaine Mercer. She lives 3 houses down, porch full of plastic flamingos, and a reputation for knowing everyone's business before even they do. You sneeze on Monday, she's got a thermometer reading posted by Tuesday. At first, I thought she was just another Janice disciple, but that afternoon she surprised me. Turns out Elaine doesn't miss a thing. Hidden in one of her lawn gnome planters, because of course she has those, was a tiny motion-activated cat. Bought the whole circus in crisp HD. The paint, the eggs, Greg's weird megaphone rant, and Janice standing across the street, pretending to sip iced tea while smirking like she'd just lit a match. Elaine didn't say much when she knocked on my door later that night, just held up a little flash drive and said, "You'll want to see this." And folks, that's the moment I knew. Janice may have had the crowd, but I had the receipt. Fear, I've learned, is the fertilizer of fake authority. Janice doesn't lead by respect, she leads by paranoia. Make one family repaint their house for a shade clash, and the rest start asking what shade they're allowed to be. Fine a guy for a flower bed, and suddenly marigolds are controversial. People weren't siding with her because they believed in her. They were scared of becoming the next target. That's how this mob happened. That's how Greg became her microphone with legs. And that's how my driveway turned into the HOA's version of a public execution. But fear only works until one person refuses to flinch. And thanks to Elaine's little flash drive, I wasn't flinching anymore. As I watched the footage that night, paint still drying on my car and anger humming in my chest, I realized this wasn't just my battle. This was a pattern, a culture Janice had created and nurtured like a toxic garden, fertilized with fines, watered with whispers, pruned with threats. And like all bad gardeners, she had finally underestimated which roots were going to push back. I sat there in the dark, flash drive in hand, and started planning my next move. Because once the mob has their pitchforks out, the only thing left to do is build a bigger bonfire of truth. And trust me, I was just getting started. And if this story hit close to home, if you've ever dealt with a neighborhood tyrant, fake authority, or just plain old HOA nonsense, do me a favor. Share this video with a friend who might need a little backup too. Maybe they've got a Janice on their street. Maybe they've been too quiet for too long. Either way, stories like this, they remind us we're not alone. Leave a comment and let me know what you think of this story. And don't forget to subscribe, because next episode, let's just say Janice picks the wrong lawyer to lie to. You won't want to miss what comes next. I thought the flash drive was the bombshell. I was wrong. Elaine Mercer didn't just catch the mob in action. She caught Janice's entire playbook unraveling. The next morning, she showed up on my porch like a woman who'd just filed her taxes early and wanted a trophy. "I've got more," she said, sliding a weathered accordion folder into my hands like it contained classified war intel. Inside? Emails, printouts. Old board meeting minutes Janice thought she'd destroyed, and tucked in the back, a spreadsheet with fine amounts next to resident names and notes like remove, pressure, unstable. She had a system. Janice wasn't just dishing out fines, she was running folks out, one violation at a time. This wasn't HOA enforcement, this was social engineering with a yardstick and a power trip. And now, I had her fingerprints all over it. Enter Ryan. My neighbor from 2 doors down. Tall guy, tech-savvy, big laugh, and apparently a collector of HOA battle scars. He'd been fined for installing a motion light that Janice claimed disrupted the nighttime ambiance. He'd brought coffee and rage in equal measure. "She's got Greg wrapped around her finger and Harper in her back pocket," he said. "But folks are watching now. Your story is making people bold." He had already backed up Elaine's video and started archiving emails from the community chat before Janice's cronies could delete them. When he found a memo showing Janice raised fines from $50, 0 cents, to $500, 0 cents, without any board approval, I knew I wasn't crazy. She wasn't just petty. She was profiting. And nothing turns a petty tyrant into a full-blown monster faster than unchecked profit. We started building the case. I dug into public financial records, shout out to my real estate background, and traced HOA expenditures for the past 5 years. The math didn't lie. The fines collected far outweighed any visible improvements. No new lighting, no park benches, no landscaping contracts. Just a lot of miscellaneous maintenance that conveniently ended in round numbers, like Janice's HOA fund was her personal piggy bank. Shake it hard enough and nickels fell out, labeled Community Unity. Meanwhile, every family that pushed back, gone within a year. Below market sales, rumors spread. The more I read, the more it felt like Copperwood was less a neighborhood and more a staged crime scene with curb appeal. We weren't just documenting abuse. We were exposing a business model disguised as a homeowners association. Then came the invoice. Slapped on my front door, bright orange, like a parking ticket from hell. Tows scheduled for tonight, $1,000, 0 cents cash release or impound. Janice had called the towing company and prepaid. That's when Ryan said, "You need to record this call." So I did. I rang the tow dispatcher, asked about the order, and after some polite small talk and a promise to send referrals their way, the guy slipped. "Yeah, the HOA lady said to keep it quiet. She's paying with the community card." Boom. Misuse of funds caught on tape. I paid the ransom. Yeah, that's what it felt like, and saved my car. But I didn't pay in silence. That night, we posted the audio and the spreadsheet to the neighborhood chat. Title, "Where Your Dues Really Go." In less than 10 minutes, the comments started piling up like HOA complaints after a 4th of July barbecue. Some residents replied with disbelief, others with anger. A few of Janice's diehards still circled the wagons. Greg wrote something about preserving neighborhood integrity while conveniently ignoring the $6,000 0 cents tagged next to his own name in Janice's spreadsheet. But what really stood out? The silence from people like Clara Bennett. The neighbors, who'd always played it safe, they weren't defending her anymore. They were watching, waiting. And the more we posted, the more the tide shifted. For the first time, Janice didn't control the conversation. Truth did. And that scared her. If this story sounds familiar, it probably is. Petty power has a way of showing up in every zip code. Different faces, same script. So if you found this video helpful, or if you know someone who's been steamrolled by their HOA, send it to them. Nobody should fight this kind of nonsense alone. Leave a comment and let me know what part of this story made your jaw drop. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, let's just say Janice takes things way too far and someone ends up in cuffs, but not who you'd expect. The HOA meeting that night felt less like a community gathering and more like a bad courtroom drama where the prosecutor wrote the script, directed the scene, and starred as the victim. The room was packed. Some residents curious, some nervous, and a few looking like they'd been dragged there as part of a neighborhood sentence. Janice sat at the front table with her loyal sidekick Greg, flanked by two board members who looked like they were silently praying for early retirement. The moment the meeting started, Janice clicked a remote and a grainy video began to play. There I was, on the screen, pacing in front of my car. But the audio had been twisted. She'd spliced together random clips to make it sound like I was threatening her. Gone were her screams, her threats, her paint-stained minions. All that remained was a portrait of a man disturbing the peace. The crowd murmured. The fiction had begun. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up with the flash drive in my pocket and a binder full of receipts. Literal ones. Janice's HOA rules, I said, are like expired coupons. Meaningless but loud. A few chuckles. Good. People were still human in here. I pulled up a chart showing 5 years of rising fine revenue, contrasted against a maintenance budget that looked like it had flatlined after 2018. Where did the money go? I asked, because I sure haven't seen any new swing sets or sidewalk repairs. Janice interrupted, banging the gavel like Judge Judy in a caffeine spiral. This is irrelevant. This is about your violations. I smiled and said, exactly. So let's talk about them, because according to your own handbook, none of my so-called violations exist, which means the real violation might be how you've been running this HOA like a private club with public money. Now you could feel the shift. People sat straighter. Clara Bennett stopped checking her phone. Even Officer Harper, standing quietly in the back like furniture with a badge, leaned forward. I handed copies of the spreadsheet to the board members. Greg tried to stop me, but one of them actually thanked me. That's when Janice cracked. He's manipulating data, she shouted. He's been stirring discord, threatening board members, vandalizing property. I raised a brow. Really? Then why haven't I been fined for that, too? The gavel pounded again, and Janice, sensing she was losing her grip, hit the nuclear button. This man vandalized my car last night. I have proof. You could hear a pin drop. Right on cue, 2 officers stepped into the meeting room, walked directly toward me, and asked me to step outside. Janice put on her best soap opera expression, equal parts victim and proud dictator. She waved a folder dramatically. He poured paint on my car as retaliation. I have video. The room buzzed. Some gasped, others whispered. And I just stood there, calm but boiling, because I hadn't even left my house the night before. But Janice knew what she was doing. Manipulators never fight fair. They don't argue the facts, they just keep shifting the goalposts until you're playing tennis on a football field and still somehow losing. I turned to Harper, who looked conflicted. "We'll need you to come to the station," he said, not meeting my eyes. And just like that, the meeting turned from courtroom drama to full-blown HOA soap opera. But here's the thing about pressure. Applied right, it doesn't just expose cracks. It forces people to choose sides. As I walked past the crowd, hands behind my back, I saw something I hadn't expected. Doubt. In their faces, not anger, not fear, just doubt. Doubt in Janice, doubt in the system they'd all blindly followed. And doubt, my friend, is a powerful thing. It's the first crack in the armor of tyranny. Going arrested for a crime you didn't commit is surreal. Getting arrested for a crime someone committed against themselves? That's a whole new genre of absurd. Officer Dalton was the one who put the cuffs on me, but he didn't do it with conviction. He did it like a man clocking into a shift he didn't sign up for. "It's procedure," he muttered, not making eye contact. "Complaint was filed. There's video." I could feel my jaw clench, but I kept it cool. Because here's the thing. I'd seen that glimmer in Dalton's eye. That flicker of doubt that tells you a man's heart isn't where his badge says it should be. And that flicker? That's a crack in the dam. I knew if I stayed calm, it would widen. Janice may have staged the show, but she forgot. Some of us have been through worse theaters. While I was sitting in a holding room staring at a beige wall that somehow felt judgmental, Tyrese and Elaine were busy turning the tide. Turns out Elaine had set up a second camera, one Janice didn't know about, hidden behind a birdhouse shaped like a cowboy boot. And that camera? It caught everything. 3:07 a.m., Janice creeping up to her own car with a brush in one hand and a bucket of green paint in the other. She wasn't even subtle about it. She took her time, humming while she worked, like she was auditioning for the HOA's local production of Gaslight, the musical. She even paused to fix her hair in the side mirror. Elaine called it her Mona Lisa of HOA madness. That footage was gold, but the way Tyrese packaged it? Platinum. By the time I was released, no charges, of course, because Officer Dalton had quietly flagged the whole thing as suspect, the video was already online. Tyrese had titled it, "Caught Green-Handed, HOA President Paints Her Own Car." And it exploded. Residents who'd stayed quiet started commenting, sharing their own stories. Janice's former allies went radio silent. Even Greg Mallory, the human bobblehead, suddenly found himself unavailable for HOA business. The vibe had changed. Janice wasn't feared anymore, she was laughed at. And if there's one thing a petty tyrant hates more than resistance, it's ridicule. Her leadership style had always been a bizarre mix of reality TV villain and church bake sale coordinator. Now people were finally seeing it for what it was, a performance, with fines instead of tickets and misery instead of bake sales. But Janice? Oh, she didn't crumble. She escalated. Because when power doesn't get what it wants, it throws a tantrum in legalese. The next morning, I got served. A civil lawsuit. $2 million for defamation, harassment, emotional distress, and, get this, sustained reputational sabotage. That's rich, coming from a woman who vandalized her own sedan and tried to pin it on a guy whose worst crime was dreaming too loud. But it didn't stop there. She filed for an emergency injunction claiming I was a financial flight risk and got my bank accounts frozen. Mortgage, business accounts, every dollar locked tighter than her board meeting minutes. It was like she went from fake rules to real war overnight. So there I was, broke on paper, but richer than ever in evidence. And while Janice danced her last legal jig, the neighborhood was watching. My post about the account freeze went viral. Folks outside Copperwood started commenting. Other HOAs chimed in. Even a retired judge reposted the video and wrote, "Classic abuse of power. Seen it 100 times." And suddenly, this wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. Anyone who'd ever been bullied behind a fake rule book, anyone who'd ever been silenced by a clipboard and a smirk, they saw it, and they cared. And that was the moment I knew Janice had finally lost something she couldn't file a motion to recover: control. If you know someone who's ever dealt with HOA harassment, please share this video with them. Let them know they're not crazy. Let them know they're not alone. And if you've been here since the start, leave a comment and let me know. What would you do if your bank account got frozen by your HOA president? Hit that subscribe button, because next time, we're going to court, and Janice brings a suitcase full of lies. Courtrooms have a certain smell when the truth starts leaking out. It's a mix of cheap perfume, sweating lies, and the faint scent of panic coming off someone who just realized their power's expiring, like yogurt past its sell-by date. That morning, Janice marched in with her high-priced attorney and a binder the size of a microwave. She wore pearls, a pastel blazer, and that smile that said, "I still think I'm winning." I came in with Eleanor on one arm, Ryan on the other, and a stack of neatly tabbed receipts so thick you'd think we were closing on a skyscraper. Janice had theatrics, I had facts, and as my grandmother used to say, never bring a gavel to a paper trail fight. Janice's lawyer opened with flair, painting her as a community servant who'd been relentlessly harassed by a disruptive neighbor with a vendetta. It was pure soap opera. She dabbed her eyes like she was accepting an Emmy. But then Eleanor stood up. And let me tell you, when a woman with 40 years of legal secretary experience opens her mouth, people shut up and listen. She presented records of every rule change Janice had ever pushed through, along with the original bylaws showing no vote had ever occurred. But the real kicker? The signatures. One after another, Eleanor laid out the comparison sheets. "This is Mrs. Delaney's real signature from her mortgage," she said. "And this is the one Janice submitted for a bylaw change. Completely different stroke patterns." She went on like that for 15 residents. By the third mismatch, the judge had stopped nodding and started leaning forward. You could feel the tide shifting. Then came the turning point. Greg Mallory, Janice's golden retriever in khakis, stood up in the middle of Eleanor's presentation and cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, "I need to say something." You could hear Janice inhale through her teeth. "She told me to sign affidavits saying Lincoln threatened the board. Said, if I didn't, my own landscaping violations would resurface. I never saw Lincoln do anything wrong." He looked right at me. "I was scared. I didn't want to lose my home." For once, Greg sounded like a man instead of a parrot. The judge asked Clara Bennett if she had anything to add. She raised her hand like a schoolteacher late to her own class. "She forged my name on a petition to raise fines by 500%. I never agreed to that. She told me it was a form for a community picnic." The room laughed, but the judge didn't. Janice for the first time looked genuinely nervous. Janice's lawyer scrambled, objecting, redirecting, deflecting. But the paper didn't lie. The signatures were clear. The financial statements showed HOA funds used at local spas, a private dog trainer, and a decor consultant, who was apparently her niece. Officer Dalton testified about the fake vandalism claim. Ryan pulled up metadata from community emails Janice claimed were accidentally deleted. The walls were closing in. And then Janice broke. Mid-testimony, with the judge asking about a $3,200.00 community enhancement charge, she snapped. "Because I was protecting this place," she yelled, slamming her hands on the table. "Some of these people don't belong here. They let their grass grow like they're in a trailer park. I gave this community standards." Her voice cracked as she waved a shaky finger toward me. "He came in here thinking money could buy respect. I showed him." That's when the gavel came down. Hard. "Ms. Whitaker," the judge said coldly, "you just admitted to willful discrimination, unauthorized financial activity, and retaliatory conduct. Please remain seated." But she didn't. Janice tried to keep talking, tried to blame Greg, blame me, blame the culture of disrespect. Security stepped in. The moment her hands hit the cuffs, the room went silent, then erupted. Some gasped, some clapped. I just sat there, breathing, watching the woman who'd tried to break me get escorted out like a bad theater act past curtain call. 3 weeks after Janice got walked out of that courtroom in handcuffs, I stood at the same HOA table where she once ruled like a suburban Caesar. But this time it wasn't about power, it was about repair. I'd been elected president in a landslide, mostly because nobody else wanted the job, and I'd already survived the full HOA horror movie. The first meeting was standing room only. Folks weren't there to argue, they were there to breathe. You could feel the air shift, lighter, sharper, like the whole neighborhood had exhaled after holding its breath for 5 years. I looked around at the faces of people who'd once flinched at Janice's emails and fines like they were IRS threats. Now, they were ready to vote, talk, laugh. Turns out, justice doesn't need fireworks. It just needs a calendar and consistency. First order of business: every bogus fine Janice ever issued, erased. Second, we rewrote the bylaws, but this time we did it in the open, with full community input and an actual vote. Elaine, who was now head of our transparency committee, made sure everything was recorded and posted. No secret minutes, no surprise fines, no folder marked for Janice's eyes only. And Tyrese? The man's now our treasurer. He tracks every penny like it personally owes him money. We even changed how meetings worked. No more rubber stamps or three-person quorum shenanigans. Everyone gets a voice. The same HOA that once handed out fines like Halloween candy now hands out neighborhood improvement grants. Funny what happens when people trust the system instead of fearing it. As for me, I still park my Rolls-Royce in the same driveway, but now people wave as they pass. Some even ask to take pictures with it. The same car that got me painted as a threat is now a symbol of what this place survived and how far we've come. I used to think I bought that car to reward myself. Now I realize I bought it to challenge someone else's comfort zone. It didn't just sit there, it disrupted, revealed, transformed. My Rolls-Royce wasn't just parked, it was planted. And now this place finally blooms? Of course, just when I thought the drama was over, I got an email from a woman in a neighboring HOA. Subject line: urgent, need help with our president. Her message read, "Our new HOA leader makes Janice look like a camp counselor. She's banned sidewalk chalk, is threatening to tow a disabled vet's van, and just installed a 6-camera system facing every house on the cul-de-sac. Please tell me what you did to stop yours." I showed the message to Elaine, who sipped her tea and said, "Looks like you've got fans, Mr. President." Tyrese just laughed. Guess the Tyrant Slayer's got a sequel coming. So maybe that's what this is now? Not just a neighborhood comeback, but a blueprint. A reminder that power without empathy is just ego in a suit, that transparency is stronger than intimidation, and that sometimes the loudest victories are the ones where nobody has to yell anymore. I never planned on fighting an HOA war. But now, I'm glad I did. Because every community deserves to feel safe in their own driveway, especially the ones with big dreams and the cars to match. And as I stood there one quiet evening, looking out over Copperwood Estates, now blooming with mismatched flower beds, kids' bikes in driveways, porch lights of every wattage, I realized something that stopped me cold. This wasn't just about a car or an HOA or even about me. This was about what happens when people stop being afraid. When one person says, "That's enough," and others start whispering, "Me too," and then they stand up. The real win wasn't becoming HOA president. It was helping turn a neighborhood ruled by fear into one rooted in fairness. Because justice, it doesn't scream, it doesn't strut, it shows up. Again and again, with receipts, integrity, and just enough fire to outlast the lies. If you've ever felt bullied in your own space, made to shrink by someone clinging to a clipboard and a title, they want you to feel alone. But you're not. This story, it proves that one person with the truth and a few good neighbors can beat back a monster built on made-up rules and manufactured outrage. We learned that real leadership serves. It doesn't scare. That transparency builds trust. That community doesn't come from control. It comes from contribution. And sometimes the very thing they try to use against you. Your voice, your car, your dreams. That's the thing that sets everybody free. My Rolls-Royce didn't tear this place down. It woke it up. So if this story hit home, or if it made you laugh, nod, or even sit up a little straighter, do something with it. Share it with someone stuck in a silent war with a petty tyrant. Send it to a friend who's afraid to speak up. Post it in your community thread, your group chat, your inbox. Let it remind people you don't have to accept crazy just because it wears khakis and carries a clipboard. Leave a comment and tell me what part hit you the hardest. Tap like if you believe every neighborhood deserves leadership with heart, and if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because next week's story, let's just say another Hoey legend is about to meet a very unexpected revolution. This is Lincoln Hale. From silence to receipts, from driveway drama to neighborhood redemption. And now, I've got a spare clipboard in case someone else needs help flipping their story.